people
Nah,
create
screw those people who join gangs. I'm not saying that joining a gang is good. I'm just saying I understand the mentality or the hurt, or maybe I don't understand because I'm not a part of a gang, but I'm empathetic towards those who do, who are hurt, who are looking for a family, who are looking for somebody to say that they are good enough and that they have worth and that they have a purpose in this world, and they join a gang and that gang gives them purpose. Is there a lot of other things that could give them purpose? Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel absolutely. But they don't. A-E-Yaps. It's in the name. Speaking of the downfall of England and London as a whole, London has fallen. Now, I think that's the name of a movie.
the raw
but
products and
genuinely, it looks like London has fallen. It's no more.
resources of a third of the world was funneled into London, feeding a massive industrial sector that made Britain the strongest and wealthiest nation in the world. But after 2 world wars and the near complete dismantling of its empire,
After 2 world wars that they didn't win, they were just there for the assist, let's be honest.
Britain's domination of the world came to an end. Both the country and the capital had to adapt, but even if they didn't have their colonies anymore, the UK still had all the advantages it needed. With first Britain and then the US's global dominance, English became the standard international language for business, trade, science, and education. With their connections to Europe, former colonies, and the US, London became a middle ground between all of these different parts of the world, and it was these factors that enabled the UK to transition from a production economy into one based almost entirely on services.
So it's like it's no longer producing anything, it's just the middleman, right? That's all I'm hearing.
Most important jewel in the UK's crown was their financial industry. During the war, when the UK had borrowed trillions of dollars in today's money from the US, New York had briefly taken over as the financial center of the world. But the two cities had a key difference, one which would ensure London wouldn't lose its spot at the top for long. In New York and across the US, the financial sector was much more strictly watched and regulated. At least in those days, the US government kept a watchful eye on their banks and their stockbrokers. London being the only other Alpha Plus
What happened to that?
city barely had any limits
Now we're
on what you could do with your
overregulated.
money. The UK's government barely had any control over it. Instead, the financial sector resided in the so-called City of London. Separate from what you'd understand today as the UK's capital, the City of London exists as a tiny, mostly self-governing enclave at the heart of the wider city. Governed by a medieval system of different business interests, the City of London made sure that their resident banks didn't have any interference or regulation from the government. The lower taxes and the relaxed attitude to financial crime meant that more investors chose the UK over America to store their money. New York is the only other Alpha++ city, and between these Alpha++ cities, London just seemed like the much easier option.
Well, it's also with time zones, right? So like America is obviously based on the Western Hemisphere. So by the time it's, let's say 12 o'clock p.m. over here, it's 8 a.m. over there, possibly even earlier or later depending on the time change. So it's just like it winds up working out nicely with the American stock trade or the stock market and the global stock market, because London is the one that holds that. So as ours comes to a close, yours opens up. So it's a nice, like I shouldn't say yours, but the European one opens up, and then as that one closes, then the Japanese one opens up, and as that one closes, guess what? Time for America to wake up again and run it back.
As the decades went
China has the best governance system. Define the best governance system.
past, the financial sector boomed in London, and other
Define
sectors
the
like
best.
manufacturing or mining withered and dried up.
You might
the
not
UK
be
was
wrong.
keen to accelerate this process. In the 80s, whilst the UK's government was breaking unions and shutting down mines across the country, they were giving the banks as much leeway as they possibly could. In 86, they got rid of the last of the meaningful protections and limits, deregulating the entire UK stock exchange.
She introduced free market policies that helped the country throw off its post-war malaise and shook up the banking world with a flurry of deregulation, making London one of the world's most important financial centres.
It was the final nail in the coffin, ensuring the UK's financial sector would become its most valuable industry by a wide margin. Of course, all of this was centred in London. Trillions of pounds were flowing in, but most of it stayed in the capital, funding the creation of massive glass skyscrapers and not much else. Meanwhile, the rest of the UK suffered. The mines, factories and other staples of the British economy.
You're saying that China can transform and complete the country within 2 to 3 decades, 20 to 30 years, while saying F off to everyone else? I will say China has development infrastructure has been insane. From what I understand, they're also in a tremendous amount of debt and don't have a lot of leverage. But it seems like every country is in a ton of debt. So what does that really even mean nowadays?
were washed away in this wave of deindustrialization. The UK was already built around London, with all of the trains and roads designed with it as the centre, but this shift meant that the wages and opportunities in London were just far more desirable than the rest of the country. While the population of the city had been falling for decades after the war, in the 90s it started to rise uncontrollably, from around 6 million to nearly 9 million people today. But the problem with this is knowing what's even true and what's not, as so many media companies in the UK report on these events differently depending on their political bias. Luckily, there's an amazing solution to this to always be informed on the truth: Ground News. Check them out today at ground.news/moon, because Ground News...
It's crazy how many ads now are sponsoring different streamers for just news, and supposedly unfiltered, unbiased news. Because if you go on mainstream media, whether it's India TV or India Now or India Today, whether it's CNN, Fox, or whatever over here, you're definitely going to get a biased point of view from the mainstream media. So it's insane to me how many of these non-biased like online tabloids are popping up and sponsoring different people. And I get with Ground, like it'll tell you like over here this is mostly a right-wing mixed kind of viewpoint. I mean, that's cool, but like I also find that that's very weird that you could program right and left wing. Like this article is right wing, this article is left wing, because if we look 10, 20 years ago what a Democrat was, it's very different. So these standards are going to have to change as news and as cycles and everything else changes.
From the original source. Personally, one of my favorite features with Ground News is their My News Bias feature, which provides you with a personal dashboard where you can get insight to your reading habits. And you get to see all the news that you consume to see where you're really getting your information from, and if you have any blind spots. This really allows me to sometimes see my own personal bias when making these videos, so that I can reconsider other views to be better informed, as getting rid of blind spots is really important with this stuff. So become better informed today by using Ground News, and if you use my link in the description, you'll get 40% off unlimited access.
You definitely don't want to get caught sniffing your own farts. You want to be as informed as you can be.
Not just on the rest of the country, but on the kind of money flowing into the city. The lack of regulation and oversight, combined with the sheer volume of transactions and deals going on, made London a paradise for money laundering. It didn't matter who you were or where your wealth came from. The City of London would happily accept your money, no questions asked. The depth and depravity of this becomes clear when you look at how closely entwined London has become with global organised crime. In 2012, HSBC, the largest UK bank, was fined $1.2 billion for laundering drug money from the Sinaloa cartel, the most powerful drug cartel in the world. If the fine was $1.2 billion, you can only assume they made 10 times that much in profits before they got caught.
Like the Peaky
The
Blinders?
Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich's story is an essential example of just how exploitable London really is. His multi-billion fortune originated in the breakup of the USSR and the pillaging of state assets that came with it. With a bid of just $100 million in a rigged auction, he gained control of an oil company that now extracts $3 billion worth of oil every single year. But
just for the mere change of $100 million, like, man, if you want to make money, you gotta spend money, holy.
what was a Russian oligarch meant to do with his countless billions? Well, the City of London was happy to provide a solution. As well as laundering his money, they also facilitated the purchases of whatever he wanted from the UK. He bought luxury apartments and mansions in the heart of London, a vast array of smaller properties for him to rent out, and even an entire Premier League football team. It only ended for Roman when the UK had to look like they were being tough on Russian oligarchs and they confiscated a bunch of his public holdings. But it's doubtful they got all of it. The regulation was so lax that anyone could anonymously buy properties worth millions if they had the right connections. It was all a game for—
I would say, what is the issue here? Him buying a team? If something is for sale and he has the money to buy it, where is the laundering happening?
bankers, a way to make a commission by auctioning off the most valuable parts of the country. The UK's government was completely complicit. They even offered people with over 2 million invested in the UK so-called golden visas, a free pass to live in the UK and buy whatever they wanted.
Wait, yours is the UK has a golden visa too? I thought Trump came up with that. I thought that was a unique idea. I guess not. But over here in America, a golden visa is 5 million. Over in London, it's 2 million. Man, inflation hits hard.
For every high-profile case like Roman Abramovich, there's hundreds or thousands of lesser international criminals and tycoons buying out the rest of London and the UK. In fact, the UK's actually handed out over 6,000 golden visas. Over half of the recipients are now under investigation for national security risks. It's estimated that over £1 billion worth of London property is owned by
That's what it seems like.
And that around 90 billion is illicitly laundered through London and the UK.
The UK is one of many countries struggling to prevent the McMafia-style money laundering through real estate. An estimated £90 billion is laundered illegally through UK every year, which also affects all law-abiding citizens as this action contributes to inflation of property market. Buying homes for inflated prices is locking out legitimate homeowners, and this activity is prevalent in the UK, particularly in the high-end market. But this can't just be UK, because this is happening all over the United States as well. I'm looking at New York, where the Roosevelt Hotel isn't even owned by Americans or the Roosevelt family. I believe it's owned by like Pakistan. And there's so many Russian oligarchs who buy up these penthouses and these suites and these places and these apartments, right? These high-end apartments. They're buying an apartment and no one's living in there. They just buy the space, and every month the rent is just coming in from these places. But this is where I get confused. It's like, if they're paying for the rent, granted, they are taking living spaces and locking in rates and creating this pseudo supply and demand shortage for housing over here in the States. But this is where I'm not smart enough to understand, how was this money laundering when it just looks like, I guess if they're buying assets over here, I don't know. But apparently this is the McMafia style money laundering through real estate. And this isn't just a problem in England, it's also prevalent in the United States.
Every year. It makes up 40% of the world's total dirty money, nearly all laundered in just a few square miles of land. So why did all of this matter for London? It's the root of the housing crisis that has only gotten worse for the city. Land in the UK has always been more scarce than in other countries because of how dense the population is, especially in London. These foreign and anonymous investors only made things worse, using their dirty money or their offshore accounts to buy up the few houses that were left. Often these were left empty for months or even years, quietly rising in value because of the artificial scarcity. London's housing market then transformed from a way for people to get a home into an investment arena for millionaires and billionaires of the world. And the worse it got, the higher the prices went and the more profitable it became for the people who owned all
real estate.
Is
the easiest way to use
this
black
bubble
money.
Doesn't seem like it's going to be popped anytime soon, especially if they keep control, as it would cost them all far too much money. Tragically, London has tried to deal with this overcrowding problem before. In the 60s and the 70s, the government had constructed massive blocks of flats to replace the old Victorian slums. At first, they were safe, peaceful communities where everyone pitched in to keep the area well maintained. The government's Right to Buy program was a big reason for this. It let residents buy the houses and flats back from the government at a discount, getting them invested in their community. But over time, these
That seems like a good idea we could use over here in America. Let the government fund affordable housing, and then your rent payment or your loan payment goes to eventually buying out that property at a discounted rate. That seems like that's something that we're going to desperately need over here in America.
Blocks of concrete fell into disrepair. London's local governments began using them as dumping grounds for the homeless and the disenfranchised, without giving them any reason to care about the properties themselves. Meanwhile, those people who had their lives together and were trying to contribute to society were left out to dry. They didn't have enough money for a deposit, but their lives were too put together to qualify for free housing. Other blocks of flats went the opposite
What is the cost
direction.
of a good house over here?
As the city expanded, some areas of the city like Tame Mead or Finsbury, which used to be council estates, slowly got bought out by private developers and were sold as luxury flats. As the prices went up and
depending on your area, $500,000, and it's not gonna get you anything crazy. To here, let me just pause it on this just so we can look. Let's go Zillow. Buy homes, 600K. Let's see, 345. $345,000 gets you this. It gets you a small little home, 3 beds, 2 baths, 1,700 square feet. And the issue with this one, if we zoom in, I mean, I guess it's the wrong 400. This isn't terrible. Look at this. Look at this. 480, 550, 750, 675, 650. This is like right around me, and I'm telling you guys, ain't nothing special around this area, right? Like, this is gonna go a $500,000 home. Easy. Maybe even more, because look at this. This would be lucky if it's 500,000. It's probably going to be some average of all of this. This is a normal house, right? 4 beds, 3 baths, almost $1 million. Estimated payment, almost $5,000 every month.
Gentrification began, it pushed out all the old working class residents.
It's insane.
Flats sold to families for 50.
Lauren and I have been talking about this as individuals. She and I have been together for 10 years, 10 whole years, right? We met back in college, back when I was second years in college, first years in college, like, and it feels, even though back then we were very much making minimum wage amount, we're making, I don't want to flex, this is not a flex, but we're making nearly $200,000 a year, right? We're close to that. And it still feels like we're paycheck to paycheck. And we're just living in a 2-bedroom apartment. We go out once a week, maybe twice a week. Right? Like the most luxurious thing I pay for is a CrossFit membership.
50,000 a couple of decades before.
There's no reason why a couple doesn't have a kid, who only has a dog, pays for a CrossFit membership. Why we are strapped down that much? It is insane.
Would then get sold for 10 or 20 times that amount. It wasn't just limited to the estates in the Tower
How can they have
Blocks.
a
The whole
family?
of London was suffering from the housing crisis.
Legitimately, I thought 200K was a good salary. Yeah, well, that's combined, but no, that's what I'm saying. Maybe my state is more expensive. Georgia is probably in the middle. Is it the cheapest state to live in? No. But is it the most expensive state to live in? Absolutely not. And it's so funny how, like, all of these problems in the world, like, this is an England problem, or this is a problem over in India or China or whatnot. It's like, at the end of the day, I think this is just a human greed and the people of the nation versus the government and how their governance of the nation really is. And that's not, like, unique to one geographical area. It seems like everybody who lives in their country is frustrated with how the government and the bureaucrats are running the country and regulating the country.
From 1995 to 2020, the average house price in London rose by over £400,000. Wages, on the other hand, stagnated. The average house price rose from around 4 years of the average salary in the mid-90s to nearly 10 years worth of wages by 2022. This had an awful effect on people's living conditions. Instead of getting the house they needed for their family, people have been forced into tiny flats. It's hard to overstate how bad this is for people.
I want to be able to do that for my future family. That's what I'm working so desperately hard on right now. I want to be able to have a setup, get a house, and be able to provide.
Overcrowding makes you much more likely to be depressed, which means that it just makes life worse in general. It can all be boiled down to a problem of supply and demand. The speculation from investors, combined with the overcrowding and influx of people, meant demand skyrocketed, but the supply couldn't keep up, even going down in some areas. The past 15 years have seen the government crack down on spending, cutting public services, and stalling the construction of new government housing. Lots of the estates that were still there got bulldozed to make way for larger luxury flats. Others were bought solely to remain empty, waiting for the prices to go even higher. As of 2022, there are nearly 35,000 unoccupied homes in the UK's capital, and those are only the ones that have been empty for over 6 months. The privately owned houses that are occupied have their rent put up every year. Even honest landlords just keeping up with the markets make them unaffordable for regular people.
And that's the biggest thing is, like, once you sign your lease for, let's say here, we have a 2-year lease and we're paying about $1,800 a month. The moment that our contract is up, it's going to go back to what is the market supply, and it's not like we could stay in and renew the contract for the same amount. It's going to cost more money to live in the same area and be a good paying consistent tenant. There is no reward for being a good on-time paying tenant, because the moment your contract is up, guess what? They're going to bump your rates. So it completely just, it makes things unaffordable, whether it be renting, and if you try to buy something, now you're liable for all the damages and all the remodeling that you might need to do. Like, it's crazy.
Ones who aren't honest, like the corporate investors buying single family homes by the dozen, have even more room to exploit their tenants. The idea of exploiting an already unfair market to drive prices even higher is at the core of modern London. Take the public transport system. Compared to the rest of the world, London's tube is generally average to above average when it comes to things like speed and reliability. For an adequate performance, you'd expect a normal price. Instead, the tube is the most expensive metro system in the world for its passengers. It's double the world average. In 2022, riding the tube from one side of the city to the other cost just under £5. Mexico City
They call a train the tube. Riding in the tube.
system only charges 20p for a similar trip. A monthly ticket
Imagine you guys are calling your trains over in India the tube.
was £360 in 2022. In Tokyo, the same kind of season ticket was just a third of the price. Transport costs in London get so bad that finding a house becomes a game of setting the cost of rent against the cost of transport.
Yep.
Sometimes a cheaper place to stay in the suburbs ends up costing more than somewhere closer to the centre purely because of the transport. It's a consequence of how
And not only is it the cost, but now it's the time. So like not only is it more money and it's more time out of your day to where you're losing that precious thing that is invaluable, which is time. You know, money, services, houses, all of that costs something, right? A physical amount. But time is priceless. There's nothing you can do in this world to get that back. They also call French fries chips as crisps. Yeah, no, the England's backwards.
how the system is funded. Whilst other countries use their taxes to maintain and keep infrastructure running, most of the funding for the tube comes from the tickets. As the system gets older and more decrepit and as more people flood into the capital,
I will say this, just kind of looking at this subway, like look how clean this is though. When we look at New York, there's rats, there's a homeless person down here, there's somebody breakdancing, doing a TikTok live stream, there's hundreds of people in here. You know, if it was India, it'd be thousands of people in here. Insane. Maybe a random cow just kind of walking through.
taxes to maintain and keep infrastructure running, most of the funding for the tube
Like,
comes from the tickets.
gotta give
As
credit
the
where
system
credit's
gets
due.
older and more decrepit,
See what I
and as
mean?
more
It's
people
clean.
flood into the
Not
capital,
over- not
it costs more and
over-dated.
more to maintain every year. It's this overpopulation which is slowly choking the tube system, but trying to use the roads is even slower and still so much more expensive. London with its age was designed for horses and carriages, not cars. The roads are very narrow, most barely able to fit 2 lanes
Wow.
of traffic. Add in a labyrinth of roundabouts, junctions, and traffic lights, and you're left with one of the worst cities for
Yo, how the... Hey, it's Piccadilly. I know that Call of Duty map. Piccadilly. This is... I could see the sniper glint over here now looking at this. Somebody better wallbang that.
carriages, not cars. The roads are very narrow, most barely able to fit 2 lanes
Hold
of
on.
traffic. Add in a labyrinth of roundabouts,
Roundabouts should be 2 lanes at most. 3? If we got a roundabout and a roundabout and a roundabout? How the hell are you supposed to drive here? I thought India was a driving level max difficulty. I'm getting confused looking at this. So UK to China, only Shane could change things now. You know what, low-key, I think India has a better claim to buy England than China does. I think India could go back in their history and give a scrolls list of why they deserve to be the first people in line to buy England. And the next up is America.
junctions, and traffic lights, and you're left with one of the worst cities for driving in the world. It means that even outside of rush hour, it can take hours to get through the city centre by car. And London's always been
It's
proud of
California.
this. If you look at this old poster from the 1970s, they show what London would look like with similar roads as Los Angeles. But without an updated modern transport system, this may just end up more likely. It's also really expensive as well. London's local governments are hungry for cash, so they'll give big fines against people for trivial things like going just 1 mile per hour above the speed limit. Then there's the controversial ULEZ charges. The ultra low emission zone scheme means that any car that wasn't made to high environmental standards costs drivers £12.50 a day. Transport is just one example of how
This is also like the same idea in New York City, where if you live outside of New York, it would cost you going through a toll, you know, an X amount, like $8. Like it wasn't a few cents, it was actual dollars to go into the city, and then guess what? You would have to leave the city again. And the only thing that does is hurt the actual people who work in New York City, because most of the people who work in the city don't live in the city because they can't afford to live in the city. So it's not only is it not being beneficial to the people who live there, but it's actually being a detriment. Same thing here over in England. It's insane.
expensive everything is in London. Another is the cultural life of the city. London used to be one of the best.
Look, back in 2019, this was still here. This little whatever this is, the scaffolding, back in 2019. Here, hold up. Look at this. Right here over on the right-hand side of the screen. This is in Call of Duty 2. It hasn't changed. It hasn't been updated since Call of Duty. And even now in IRL, it's still the same thing.
Best cities in the world for nightlife and live music, but not really anymore. The
Wait, tolls are not
bars
based on distance in the USA? No. Tolls were, in the United States, to my knowledge, the only reason why you would have a toll in your area is because it was supposed to pay for the infrastructure of that area, for the development of the highway, the development of the roadway, to fix potholes. But that very rarely ever actually happens.
and pubs nearly all exist on the edge of bankruptcy. Massive rents and falling numbers of customers have cut tons of small businesses out of the market. And you may be thinking, so why aren't people going? Well, that's yet
Was that Bobby Adolf?
again because of the prices.
Adolf?
The average cost
Whatever
of a
her name
beer
is?
in London is £6.75, with fancier drinks costing so much more on top of that. Tickets to see live music or other cultural events also cost far more
What the fuck am I looking at right here?
than they used to,
What the fuck?
locking a whole class of people out of having a good night out.
I don't go out because I don't have the funds to go out. It's your heating, your eating, your showers, or food.
Compared to the rest of the country, living in London is around 50 to 60% more expensive compared to
Wow.
other British cities, and it's getting worse every day. Over the past 4 years alone, the cost of living in London has risen by 25%. Wages, of course, haven't been close to keeping pace. In fact, they're actually going backwards. Accounting for inflation and the cost of living, Londoners have seen their wages go down rather than up on average.
Same here in the States. If you put in the inflation and how much like actually things have gone up versus the amount of salaries gone up, it's at a negative. So really, even though people are making more money now, the length of how far a dollar goes is so much shorter, they're actually kind of making less money. This is what I was talking about earlier in the video. It's like my girlfriend and I feel like we're making the same amount of money, if not a little bit less money, from when we were in college. And I promise you, we're both making 2 to 3 times the amount we were making back then.
And to add on to all of these costs, local governments are so strapped for cash that they'll take any excuse to squeeze more money out of people. The results speak for themselves. Over the pandemic, around 25% of London was living in poverty, with 1 in 20 in danger of going hungry, they're so poor. For one of the richest cities, an Alpha++ city, in one of the richest countries in the world, this is really a disgrace. It seems like poverty itself should be the most obvious cause of crime. Those who don't have what they need are more likely to take it. But when you compare the statistics, poverty has no effect on lots of crimes, including homicide. Instead, it's only local income inequality that makes all kinds of crime more likely, from petty crimes and theft to more serious violent offences. This is because of the crippling effect inequality has on people and how they view the world. In an unequal society, the success of the top 10% is constantly present in the media and in the world itself. People see the lives they could be living and the comfort they could have, but without real opportunities to get that wealth, it's only a cruel reminder of what they can't have. At the same time, the poverty and the lack of structure means there isn't the same societal limits. Young people growing up on these estates aren't constrained by their education or their relationship with the community. In lots of these cases, the community and even the family unit has broken down under the strain of poverty. It means there isn't anything else to ground their identity, and this is what gangs offer. It gives people an identity, a uniform, a social ladder to climb up, and
It also gives us a sense of family. Even though all of these people are a bunch of degenerates, they're there for each other, which is more than what most people have not being in a gang. You know, people want connection, people want to feel a part of something. So I am empathetic to those who join a gang looking for that, because they're desperate, they're hurt, and they just want to feel loved, and they want people to give them that.
and even a reason to exist. It's promoted in the UK media, with the massive rise of drill music, glorifying knife crime and gang activity. But it makes it all seem cool, and all of this is stuff that's never offered to these people anywhere else. Not
It's like, unless you're wearing like a COVID mask, this should be illegal in public. Like this whole look right here, you're just like cosplaying as a gangster, as somebody who's bad. But the moment a gun is held to your face, you're gonna break up and call for mama and daddy. Like this should be illegal in public.
Nasty, violent, and criminal people will always exist. Obviously, gang members aren't blameless victims.
Like that? Like,
but
what are
whether
you
they'll
trying to
learn
do?
how to function in society is decided by the situation they grew up in. It's the criminals at the top that create the criminals at the bottom through how they've exploited London. The inequality, the estates, the poverty, all of this creates the impression of a world of poverty without any way to escape. So in this situation, people create
Screw those people who join gangs. I'm not saying that joining a gang is good. I'm just saying I understand the mentality or the hurt, or maybe I don't understand because I'm not a part of a gang, but I'm empathetic towards those who do, who are hurt, who are looking for a family, who are looking for somebody to say that they are good enough and that they have worth and that they have a purpose in this world, and they join a gang and that gang gives them purpose. Is there a lot of other things that could give them purpose? Absolutely. I feel absolutely, but they don't.
their own hierarchy. They compete with each other over the few resources that are left to them, which in London's case means joining a gang and controlling the drug supply. And with heaps of immigrants from places all around the world, all these criminals pouring into London, make it so that criminal activity is even more competitive, and thus more violent and more profitable. Now you see in the centre of the city and in the outer suburban sprawl, London does seem incredibly safe. But as Ed Sheeran said on the Theo Von podcast, in every area of London is a really dark side.
Every area of London, literally every area, is sketchy. The nice areas are sketchy, the bad areas are sketchy.
But the root of all of this seems to be in the lower income neighbourhoods, out of the main ring of London, where each estate functions like its own territory, coming under the control of its own gang. These gangs then compete with each other, either over who controls the drug trade or just to have a reason to exist. It's the conflict itself that keeps the gangs going, a never-ending feud called the Postcode Wars. Young men growing up on the estates are constantly surrounded by it and indoctrinated into becoming soldiers. It's the only way.
Nah. See, once more, you see this walking down the street, this golf mask? Or ice hockey mask? The only time you should be wearing this is while playing ice hockey. The moment you see this, the cops should be able to whip out their gun and put 3 bullet holes, one right here, and one right here into this individual. I don't give a shit. This person is looking to cause trouble. This person is looking to be a parasite to society. And ideally, we have these officers to be pest control. And all I see right here is a pest. Get rid of it.
Into becoming soldiers.
Hell, I wish it could be like in an anime to where the police officer could pull out a sword and just right in half. And then they disappear. But that's not how it works.
It's the only way they think they can achieve success in their own world and find respect amongst their peers, with their music and culture all promoting this lifestyle. For all their lives, they've only
I know that's a crazy kind of take, an extreme take, but I think I stand on it. I think I stand 10 toes down on that. You see somebody out there who's obviously dressed like a low-level villain in a comic book. Put some lead in them.
Great buy. And so
No
crime
questions
seems
asked.
to be the only route to fast cash. In 2021, a typical year for the postcode wars,
Am I
30
crazy?
teenagers lost their lives. Most
Am
of
I
these crimes
crazy?
were committed with knives, which actually makes the problem seem smaller than it really is when you just look at fatalities.
And you know what's crazy too is now that with this issue, as he's saying right here, in 2021, London recorded the highest number of teenage homicides caused by knife and gun crimes in modern time. That year, UK's capital saw murders of some odd 30 male teenagers at the age of 14 and 19 just stab at each other like it's a PvP zone in a video game. And London's response is to stop steel production. Why would they stop steel production? Because knives are made out of steel, so if they don't produce steel, then they ain't gonna get knives. What kind of boneheaded dumb logic is that?
Lost their lives. Most of these crimes were committed with knives, which actually makes the problem seem smaller than it really is when you just look at fatalities.
People should
the
not be
majority of
tolerated?
attacks aren't lethal,
I agree.
with only 1 in 66 on average leading to the victim passing away. But
I don't care that 1 in every 66 is fatal. Is because I've seen on Twitter dudes go at it and a dude lose his hand. He went to go block somebody doing a knife and he lost his hand. He picked up his hand in the middle of the fight. It was still fighting. We are not in the dark ages anymore. We're supposed to be in the enlightened era of humanity. And London's over here acting like it's a PvP zone with melee brawlers only. Yo, don't bring a gun, bring a knife.
Instead, they're left with life-changing injuries. Knife crime
Yeah.
has gone up by over 90% between 2011 and 2021 as a result of increasing gang activity, and it's still rising today. And because
I'm getting
of
a
this,
lot
it's
of murder and
proliferating
death on my
into all of
timeline.
London, like Ed Sheeran said, which is why you see videos where you see random guys getting stopped by police who literally carry full-blown machetes while walking around. There are countless stories of people just randomly getting knifed in London. It got so bad that the murder rate in London
That's bad. Literally, London is just a PvP server.
was actually higher than New York at one point, and it's all gotten this bad not
That's
just because
bad.
of the lack of cohesion, the transient lifestyle of London, and the huge demand for certain drugs like cocaine, but one of the
See, like, I see something like this, right?
London and the huge
That store, this store,
cohesion, the transient lifestyle
right here, this store that they're trying to kick in, that is somebody's personal property. And in my opinion, if they're attacking your property like that, you have every right to defend it. So I'm going to load up my shit, and I'm going to make sure I have at least 9, because each one of these are getting 3.
of London and the huge demand for certain
Like, I
drugs.
just... we have a history of this in America, and I'm sorry for keeping pausing this, but we have a history of this in America where back in the day it was called Korean rooftoppers, where these Koreans and their businesses were getting ransacked by the stereotypical group of people who you think it is, and they had to go on the roofs of their businesses and shoot them off like they were playing a wave game of like a hold off the horde, like it was a game of firefighting Halo, where you're just shooting off the freaking bots as they're running in and trying to pillage your store. How? That only lasts a little while, because the moment it gets light and people see, oh shit, I'm gonna not just get shot, I'm gonna get fucked up if I try to steal out of the store. Guess what? They're not gonna steal out of that store anymore.
like cocaine, but one of the main core reasons is that London has been unable to deal with the consequences of its own inequality. The police are so poorly funded and overstretched, they barely even venture into the estates. And
That's also not true in this case. The police are messed up, but the police are going after boys and girls and like kids who are posting memes online, while completely ignoring minorities who aren't even legal citizens of this country, who are stabbing and raping and pillaging everything. They don't go after them, but they'll go after the kid who posts a meme online who's saying, you know, the queen is stupid.
massive amount of gang violence goes completely unsolved. Even if they did catch them, the UK is currently facing a huge overcrowding problem in the prisons. It's gone to the ridiculous point where violent criminals are now getting incredibly short sentences or no punishment at all, just because there isn't space for them. In fact, only recently, a bunch of violent criminals were released from prison, way before they were supposed to be released. Added onto that is the fact that the police in the UK are not respected. They're almost seen as a joke by almost everyone in the UK, and almost no crime gets solved here. It's only by
Not just in the UK, globally. Globally, we look at the United Kingdom's police force and we just kind of laugh at it. And you're telling me in India, police can't use handcuffs because the Supreme Court banned them, stating that they are a crime against humanity, or they were against human rights. That is super stupid. Super stupid. Because if somebody is doing something, you need a way to detain them without putting lead in them every single time. Even though I am a big proponent of that, especially if they're criminals, they earned the lead in their body, right? They earned it. But not every crime deserves lead in the body. And sometimes somebody's going out of control or fighting, you just need to detain them, let them cool off, let them simmer down, slap them around a little bit, give them some water, let them reset. Like, that's insane to me.
reversing this inequality.
Now police just hold them by the hands? Or are all the police officers in India like Jackie Chan or something? What? They don't care if police die? And that's where it's like, man, I feel so bad for all of my brothers and sisters who go out in uniform to try to protect the community, try to protect the society they're in. While they have their hands behind their back, they can't even do their job the way that they truly need to be able to do it. You want enforcement, and you want enforcement to work. Not so that you're scared to go out and do things, but if you're a law-abiding, you're somebody who follows the law, you're not going to be worried about it. The only people who are going to be worried about it are the people who try to break the law. So why are we trying to help them at all when they're not even trying to be a benefit to the society? I completely agree with you, Harsh, when you're saying that. Why are we giving tolerance to the intolerant? Right? Why are we trying to apply laws to people who aren't even going to abide by them in the first place? And it's only going to make people who follow the law have a harder, more difficult life. I think we need to come in. I mean, you guys know this, how I'm in this video, how I think about this. We need to be way harder. We see people carrying out all this shit. Bah, 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 bah. walk up, slap them, and be like, why were you such a stupid piece of shit? And then when they try to answer, pop, one more time. I don't give a fuck.
Harsher punishments, stricter laws, and giving the police the resources they need, that London would ever get better. But as things stand, it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon.
London is on fire. London has fallen. And it's sad to say that I think in my lifetime, I know this is kind of a hot take. I'm heated right now. This video kind of upset me, but I genuinely think in my lifetime, we are going to see the official downfall of England. United Kingdom, England. I don't know what it'll be, but it'll definitely be not that. It's going to be ran by a bunch of Pakistanis or Iranian, a bunch of Muslims who are being imported in right now, and they're going to, do Sharia law. And instead of United Kingdom, it's going to be United Sharia, and it's going to be a terrible day in history. Terrible day. If so long England, but only if they don't course correct. There's a chance. I don't have faith. As a resident of London, I can confirm that it is a shithole. Even the fancy areas are slowly turning into dumps. How sad that London has fallen is no longer just a title of a dumb action movie. You get stabbed, but won't have it on camera. Pull a cheeky left, they will, huh? UK police also seem to care more about hurt feelings and mean words than actual crime. Pathetic. This is exactly what I was talking about. Yep, PDs across UK have been getting a lot of criticism for not being willing to lift a finger to investigate real crime because that takes work that they could be seen as racist. But they're happy to arrest someone for a joke or having the wrong opinion because it's easy and keeps the wrong think to a minimum. It's actually insane what we're having to deal with in today's world. And once more, I don't know if it's reassuring or if it's bothering that these issues that I see kind of popping up in America and India are now in England. It really feels like there's this weird mind virus. I don't want to say woke, but it feels like there is this mind virus that starts out in government. And what it does is it affects the people in that society and causes this level of chaos. It's insane. It's heartbreaking. And I hope that England can adapt, change, and just be better. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, then please like the video, subscribe, and if you really like it, share it with some of your friends. My goal here is to spread a positive message while sprinkling my 2 cents on big topics like American, Indian, and world geopolitics, and even small stuff like Twitch drama and online debacles. And if you want to see it live, come join me over on Twitch. Twitch.tv/ActuallyElrod. That's where I'm going to do all my reactions, and after the reactions, that's where we get down a game. And if you're like, hey, I have a video that I want this dude to sprinkle his 2 cents on, then come over on my Discord and let me know and join the community there. And while we're at it, I have to say thank you to everybody who's made that Discord just so poppin'. I never thought I'd have a Discord that's so flowing. It's really cool to see. Shout out to you, Bobby, Omni, Demon, all of you who have been in there who are just super active. Logie, you're the man. Logie is the one who's like modding and helping run the server, so thank you, Logie. Lastly, I challenge you. I have a challenge for you. Make somebody laugh today. We all know there's enough hate and vitriol in the world. If energy is contagious like the flu, then let's spread and get everyone contagious with our positive energy, right? Not negative energy, because there's so much of that. And if we could just be a small little change in someone's day, then you never know. Maybe that's the thing that starts shifting this world to a happier, healthier, just better place. And with all of that said and done, thank you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.